And Ron is now on board. Good morning, Jen. And Destin. Well, looks as
I
if-
guess while we're going around, we should say good morning to Ward too.
Yeah, well, I was getting
And
there
Michelle.
too. So good morning, Ward.
Good morning.
And Michelle.
Morning.
Well, looks like we have everyone on board. So I'll do the honors of calling to order this meeting of the Bishop area.
Give me just a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Give me just a minute.
Yep, you got it, Michelle.
You got it. Can't do anything unless you're going.
That's right. You're muted, Michelle. Did you say we're good to go?
Yes,
Okay.
we're ready now. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, then we'll like to call to order the Board of Directors meeting of the Bishop Area Wastewater Authority this January 18th, 2022. The time now is 8:05. This meeting is being conducted via Zoom teleconferencing in compliance with all state of California legislation and regulations pertaining to public meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next item on the agenda, excuse me, is the call to, or the Pledge of Allegiance. And even with a raspy throat, I'd like to do the honors. If you would all please stand and face the nearest flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Let's see how long this raspy throat goes. The first item on our agenda will be a roll call. Michelle, would you please call the roll?
Chairman Pachuki,
Here.
Vice Chairman Mahovey,
Here.
Board Member Stone,
You're muted, Ron. Ron, hopefully you can hear us and you're muted. We can't hear you till you unmute.
Board Member Stone. I unmuted him. Hopefully he's here. Board Member Schwartz.
Here.
We'll continue efforts to get Board Member Stone on board, but I guess we could proceed with just a note to the record that there's technical issues connecting with Board Member Stone and getting a response from him with regard to his presence. For the record, we also have Michelle and Jennifer attending. Michelle, do we have any other members of the public in attendance that you're aware of?
I do not have any other attendees.
Thank you. This agenda item number 4 on the agenda is public comment. This is a time set aside for comments from the public discussing or taking action or discussing. Hang on a second, let me get this straight. Well, there are no members of the public present. Michelle, do we have any written comments from the public?
There are no written comments received.
Thank you. Next item, agenda item number 5 is the consent calendar. All matters under the consent calendar are considered routine by the authority and will be acted on by one motion. What we have in front of us this morning is for approval or filing, and that is the minutes of the BAWA Board of Directors meeting from October 19th. The second item is the extended resolution 2021-01 for another 30 days, allowing the board to conduct teleconference and virtual meetings pursuant to AB 361. Do we have a motion to approve all items in the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar as is.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Michelle, would you please poll the board?
Vice Chairman Mahovey,
Yes.
Board Member Schwartz,
Yes.
Board Member Stone, Chairman Pachuki.
Yes.
Motion approved for the consent calendar for the Tuesday, January 18, 2022 meeting.
All right, thank you. Next item, agenda item number 6, new business, staff and board to discuss potential wastewater treatment options. Destin, are you prepared to take the lead on that? You're muted, Destin.
Yeah, I am. And I just put this on as discussion with no staff report because I think it's not ready or even needs to be that developed. It just needs, this discussion needs to happen for all of us to take it back to our boards and councils, in the future. I'm not saying tomorrow or even next week, but throwing out the ideas, and we've talked about them all a lot. I'm learning as we go a lot more. I apologize. I just forwarded an email to you all from Robert Edgerton, our environmental guy. I thought I did it last week and I didn't. Sorry about that. But basically, so in the irrigation, we obviously have the NRCS money secured, $600,000-ish that we're looking at a $3 million project right now to cover the current discharge area. But I think we have to be really honest with ourselves right now and talk about this environmental issues to get through. I asked Robert for maybe a proposal and a cost for cultural research, moving on to the cultural part of CEQA. And he sent this email, which is pretty concerning, but something I kind of had in the back of my mind, I wondered about. Robert did this exact same thing with the Big Pine CSD down there for disposal of wastewater, and they wanted to go in a sprinkled system. And they could not get through the cultural part of this. So it's a known area. You got to, well, obviously you bring the tribes in, tribal consultation. They're very actively involved with the Big Pine project, the Bishop tribe and the Big Pine tribe. And Robert's very, very concerned, and you can see in his email about the cost and the time to get through that part of the CEQA process. If you look at it, there's phase 1, that's the surface. They'll go out and just walk the site. If they find any artifacts, beads, chips, arrowheads, then they go into phase 2. And then phase 3 even more is then they start doing some excavations. And if they find anything on the property, then it brings up a whole nother way, another process of probably to develop the project. We'd have to have a tribal member, archaeologist from the tribe being out there the entire project. He's basically saying that he feels very strongly that to get through the environmental constraints and the cultural stuff, he said we could be talking 7 figures. just to get through that, and how much time will it take? Is it his biggest concern? Is he says this could take anywhere from 3 to 10 years to get through this process. So that's I don't like to start everything off with bad news, but I think we have to be very realistic here of what's the feasibility of getting this project done, knowing full well how old our plants are. So, and I have submitted an application to the State Water Quality Control Board for our irrigation project, a pre-application. And they're, I will hear back. That particular funding pot is, it's getting enhanced with the Rescue and Recovery Act money, but that money is always there. They continually have money every year to fund different projects. So it's there in the queue, but there's another biggie, and I want to bring up with that application is that our fees need to be 1.5% of the median household income in order to be eligible to even apply for this money. So for the city of Bishop, that is a number is about $65 a month. We're currently at 40. So and I'm not saying this that we can't do that, or we can. That's as a council, we need to talk. I mean, and then that's not even taken into account. I'm not sure where the district would fall, because it doesn't look like they're eligible for any of these grants, and they're mostly going to have to come up with footing this bill on their own somehow, or a loan, or you guys, that's your decision to make. But the new plant idea is becoming more and more realistic in my mind. That's maybe the preferred direction we need to look at. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Sorry, the 1.5% that you're talking about, is that an upper limit or a lower limit?
That's the low that you have to charge at least 1.5%.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be over it. And it's interesting, but they essentially, I've had some long discussions with the people at the state who actually administer this program. And, they said, what it really means is if you can't help yourselves, we can't help you. Is what they're saying. And it's kind of backwards thinking in my mind, but it's always been that way with the state. And a lot of times USDA grants are the same way. They want you to be charging at least a minimum amount to get there. And then, like I said, for us, big increase, but it's also something that, the other choices we don't, we have no choice. We build it on our own, and a plan or an irrigation project, and we have to charge $90 or something more than that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, but it's a real thing that I think we need to be looking at in the next, the coming months, or with our next rate study. How do we get there, or how, what are we comfortable with doing? The new plant construction application I have in is for up to $500,000 for design of a new plant. That one's submitted as well. I'm waiting to hear back if we can get that one in the queue and get funded without being at the 1.5%, if we have time to do that. Because either way, we're looking at, if we got funded today and we're hired a consultant, we're probably 2 to 3 years away from a complete design of a plant. And at that number, and I've talked with Jonathan a lot again about it, that's, again, that's a $15 to $20 million number. Nobody can put their hands on it exactly until you have a design, but that's a very, it's not even rough. It's a good estimate. It's conservative, but we already kind of went down the scale once, and I believe what was that number? That number several years back was like $11 million.
11 to 12, yes.
But they also, with that, the city would be eligible to potentially get up to $6 million of that money through grant through the State Water Quality Control Board. And again, I have unsuccessfully been able to get a hold of Peter Bernascoti. I'm not sure if he's at work or what's going on, but we would hope that the tribe would be a big contributor, or at least a big partner on this plant, and they have been wanted to in the past. But I honestly, I'm just going to speak from being here for a long time with this sewer plant. Ours is 72 years old this year. And concrete, everything does not last, concrete life in a really good environment is 100 years, and it's essentially a concrete structure, everything we have down there. So at what point, how far do we chase irrigation down a path and spending that money knowing full well that the plant is going to be ultimately the answer? And I would like to throw one thing in so I don't forget. Mike Plasiak replied to our questions on Jay Cass's email with all those pond lining and this and that. And Mike said, no, pond lining doesn't have to happen to do your project, but we'll look at it in a year from now and see if the issue with groundwater has been resolved with irrigation, or do we need to line the ponds? So we still haven't got around that giant elephant in the room of pond lining. And like I said, I don't want to come here like bearer of bad news, but I think we have to be realistic, because we're sitting on a huge responsibility for both the city and the district with sewer plants and all that. And how can we, I feel like we have time now to plan this and make a good path forward, instead of something going haywire, or the state going, hey, time for you guys to get something done and force us into doing it faster than we're ready to do it too. With that, I'll leave for discussion for you all.
Obviously, I'll have some things to add in, but before I kind of follow up to Destin's points, Karen and Stephen, what are your thoughts based on what Destin has said, and based on you having followed this for some time now? You've been involved in meetings and presentations. What are your thoughts?
Karen, did you want to go first, or I can go?
Oh, you can go for it.
Sure. I mean, my thoughts have always been, ultimately, we know we're going to need a new plant. Ultimately, we know that economies of scale ought to make sense, and having two plants within spitting distance of each other hasn't, like, it seems like a waste of a duplication of resources that aren't needed, right? And so ultimately, we've always known that we wanted a plant. However, the challenge that we've always had is there was the immediate issue that the community services district plant was running up into capacity. And then there was the long-term issue of building a new plant is extremely costly. And we are beholden to our community members and our taxpayers to make wise decisions with their money. And we can't just up their rates appreciably, because that would not go over well. So the whole plan with the irrigation was, I've always viewed it as a means to buy us, a cheap means to buy us time to get ready to do a full plant. And so that's why I think at the time it made sense to go down this path. Now that we're having more information on it, it seems like it's not going to be as cheap as we thought it would be. B, it's not going to be as fast as we thought it could be. And so I do think we should be looking. Do I think we're at a point where we should pull the plug on that effort altogether? I don't know that I'm convinced on that yet, but I do think we need to start allocating more resources to actually figuring out what a new plant would look like. So what are the parameters of the plant itself? What's the capacity? What's the energy usage? And then of course, with that, what would be the actual cost of building that infrastructure, and what this new infrastructure, because it's going to have higher operating costs, how that is going to actually translate to a monthly charge to our ratepayers. And so I think once we have that sort of information in hand, then we can have a look at, all right, how can we actually fund such a plant, right? So that's kind of my take on it.
Thank you. Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Stephen said. I believe that has to be the end goal. So how do we get there? And it definitely has some what seem to be big roadblocks in the way, but we just have to look at those roadblocks and figure out how to navigate around them or get them out of the way, or figure out how to strategically reach the end goal of a new plant. And we just need to put it there, strategically look at all the steps we need, and despite some of the hurdles, figure them out.
Okay. With regard to those points, you might recall that a number of years ago, both the city and the district started feasibility studies on a new plant. And then there was a decision made by the city to let the district go forward, but the city chose not to with regard to a new plant. At that time, the district made a decision to direct the engineers, and Jonathan Lesperance was involved with R.O. Anderson at that time. The district directed the engineering firm to consider that at some point in the future, this plant is likely to be a unified treatment system. In other words, the city and the district. So all of the work that we did on feasibility study in the background took into account that it was likely that not only would the district expand their plant, but that the city would come on board at some point in the future, recognizing the age of the city's plant. So on the shelf at this time are feasibility studies that are partially completed, and that's some good news, I think. An investment has already been made, in part paid by the city when they were involved, and the district went forward out of the district's funds to consider the bigger picture, not just the district. So we've got a head start, if you will, on some feasibility. And Jonathan Lesperance has all the files. They've been transferred from R.O. Anderson to him at Loomis, his current firm. Jonathan's very familiar with it. I spoke with Jonathan. Essentially, they're ready to continue the feasibility study, cost and feasibility study that was initiated a number of years ago. The reason why I think this is beneficial to BAWA at this time is that with regard to grant funding or low interest loans, whatever it is that we will need to finance a project of this nature, since we already have this work started, we may have a better position in the queue for funding. We can demonstrate to whatever agencies are going to deal with the funding that, hey, we're already down the road a ways, and by the time we actually get serious about negotiating funding, we can have a good portion of this feasibility, cost and feasibility study completed. So in kind of the darkness of the situation that Destin's bringing up, and I don't think any of us would have anticipated that it would have gotten to that point, there is a ray of sunshine in that some good work has been done, and I think it positions us better than other agencies to be considered for funding. So that's one point I have. Karen and Stephen, I think you made the point with regard to the pasture irrigation, the more beneficial discharge of treated effluent, that we shouldn't just walk away from it. We should consider all resources and look at everything before we I just listened to Robert Edgerton and even I probably even and I tried to read that email Destin quickly, and yeah, truly Robert is concerned. There may be some significant funding dollars available. I don't know, so that may help. But it is a matter of time and money, and both of those figures have gone in a direction that we wouldn't have anticipated, and a magnitude that we couldn't have anticipated. So I guess continuing to look at the pasture irrigation, continuing to work with DWP with regard to a land transfer. Certainly we don't want to send a message to DWP that, oh, don't worry about the land transfer.
Right.
Do that. At this point, a lot of work's been done. They're not moving at the speed we'd like them to. When we started this in 2019, by now we expected to have the system in place, not only the land transferred, but the system cranking. So
Let me interrupt real quick, Walt, just so everyone knows, Todd Thornburg from DWP joined us just a moment ago.
good.
You see him on the attendees list.
Good. Well, I'm glad Todd is there because we're just addressing the DWP transfer at this time. So, we want to continue with that. We want to look at all of the details involved with the transfer, and there are some hiccups. There are some little bumps in the road, but I think we can work through them. So those are my thoughts. I may have talked around in circles a little bit, but Karen and Stephen, I agree with both of you. The end strategy is a new plant. What do we need to do to head in that direction? Personally, I think the first thing we can do is give direction to an engineering firm to continue with the cost and feasibility studies. We will need that no matter what. And the work that's already been done, I would guess, is 80% pertinent. The technology, the other thing, talking about technology for all of us to consider, a new plant, we will be, both the district and the city will be required to meet higher standards with regard to treated effluent discharge. Our WDRs are well overdue for being renewed. And if they were to be renewed today, even with the plants we have, the discharge would be challenging for us to meet with the type of technology we have in our current plants. We are both operating at optimum efficiency. To get better water quality with treated effluent would be costly and difficult for us with what we have. So Lahontan has been patient with us. They would like to see us come up with solutions, and the pasture irrigation system that we've been working on was acceptable to them. They were looking forward to that being a means of treating the water so that groundwater is less impacted. But a new plant will be operating at higher efficiency and will discharge higher quality treated effluent. So keep that in mind. It's not only capacity, it's not only updating and providing a facility that will go into the future many years. It's also meeting Lahontan's discharge standards. And the hammer will be dropping at some point, and we need to show good faith effort in moving.
Right. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, and I think that's a good approach to direct some resources towards the feasibility study in particular, because I mean, where I'm saying that we should get that information in hand is that, yes, at this point, we know that doing the irrigation could cost up to a few $1 million and could take 5 years. But if for some reason, when we work out all the parameters of a new plant and everything, it turns out that it's something like a $30 million project, and our rates are going to have to go up by by factors of 2 or 3, then we need to, Karen and I at least have to have that information in hand, because we interact with our ratepayers on a daily basis, right? And we have to figure something out at that point. And so that's why I think this is a good approach to direct. That's why I'm saying I'm not convinced that we stop the other path. I think we need to give ourselves as many possibilities as we can. I don't think until we have those numbers in hand of how much everything's going to cost, I think that's a point where we can make a harder decision on which road to take and where the two paths diverge. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I've always been under the belief that if we could build the irrigation system, it will pay off dividends for a long time, because we're presently using a lot of manpower just to irrigate what's out there. So, even when the new plant comes someday, that irrigation system will not be a waste of money. It'll continue to be important to the operations down there.
Correct. It will also enable the current land use to continue, and that being grazing, which is beneficial to managing vegetation for wildfire defensiveness. And there are benefits to that irrigation system, and we'd like to, as Destin said, we would like to incorporate it as a portion of the wastewater treatment, be it in a new plant or existing. So we'll continuing to take a good hard look at it, possibly either looking at the areas and scaling back a bit, or modifying where parts of it is. So we just need to take a good long look. With regard to the costs, and Stephen, you mentioned the figure 30 million. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we're through with the feasibility, which takes time, it takes a couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if the number gets there, particularly given recent increases in construction. And Destin's been looking at that with the diversion structure and other projects you've had with the city. Now, when the district was involved in the feasibility study, Kent from Morrow Anderson incorporated in one of the reports, and I don't recall which one it is, a statement with respect to California legislation stating something to the effect that if a project creates a hardship on the ratepayers or the public, there's some legislation that says either, I don't recall what's involved, but essentially the project need not go forward if that hardship is created essentially through the majority of the ratepayers. I'm going to key into Jen here for a minute. Jen, do you recall that? We've discussed it from time to time. Do you recall that, or do you know how we might be able to retrieve that statement?
I do recall it, but I'll have to research it.
Yeah, it was, I don't recall which report it was. So just throwing that out there, and I don't know what that means to us, but even at the lower end of the cost estimates, we're talking about significant increases for the ratepayers, district and city. And they're of a percentage increase that's just not acceptable to any of us here in this meeting or to the public.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the last meeting we had, there was the consultant on the phone, and he talked about a community in Tahoe that had recently done a new plant, and how they had received tons of grant funding that was it Lumos? Who was?
Yeah, they were the
Yeah.
consultants. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I really feel like they're, sure, if the scenario is that the ratepayer is the one that has to fund the entire project, then we are in some hot water because it might not be feasible. But seeing that other communities have done this without really putting a huge impact on the ratepayer is going to be in our benefit. And they had mentioned that they would come back to us with some information on other communities similar to ours that have been in the exact same situation.
Yeah, and Jonathan was kind of, him and I speak often, and he was, to address that question, Karen, he is going to start working on that once we got done with this. He kind of needs some direction if we were, and also he's not in contract to do that work right now. So if we wanted to use them, if we so choose them, then we can go forward with that. And you're right, it's a huge problem in the state right now. I know they, I don't know what they call the basin there, but west of San Luis Obispo, it services, many of the areas around there. They built a brand new plant there, just opened last year. And it was, I don't know how they could do this or how it worked, but their fees went from $87 a month to $165 for just wastewater for that whole area now. Exactly. And getting back to something Walt kind of touched on a minute ago, Mike Plasiak was the one that told us that if a project is not good for the ratepayers or the people of the state, then they can't make you do that. But saying that, you also go, okay, what does that mean? Does that mean we don't have to do anything? We just keep doing what we're doing, or that's a slippery slope on that one right there. To be honest,
that seems like we're gonna get in the middle, in the tug of war between Lahontan and the state legislature. No, I don't know that we want to be in that position.
No, I don't either.
One question that I have is, you mentioned, I know that City of Bishop in particular has lower median income than the statewide average. We qualify we're designated a federal economic opportunity zone. But I guess my question is, when we're looking at the Bawa area, does that mean that the Bawa would not be eligible for a lot of that the low income community funding because the median incomes are so much higher with the when the other areas are incorporated? Because I would imagine there would be some sort of a trade-off in that. Yes, our median income would be higher, so we wouldn't be eligible for as many things. But now we have, we're also being able to represent the tribe in as Bawa, and so there'd be avenues of funding that would be going in that direction. Do we have a sense of how instead of thinking of both entities being eligible for state and federal funding, how the combined entity is eligible in a different way, or no?
So I had that conversation with Matthew at the state. We talked about it quite in depth actually, and he came to the conclusion that the city needed to apply for everything on their own. He said that these other folks, but with that, the caveat to me is the tribe is a major player in this, and their median house or their household income, the district cannot use it. So how could we as Bawa, because they only buy capacity at the plant, they're not individual customers. So, I don't know, and that's why I don't know if it means going and meeting with their tribal council and trying to talk through this thing, because they're a huge player in this and also have way more funding opportunities.
They have different funding opportunities than we do, yeah, for sure. So.
And they're actually the growth of the tribe is basically inhibited by the plants right now by not having the capacity for them to grow. So there's a lot of those avenues within the tribe that, and I don't want to step on the district's toes. I mean, but I'm talking as Bawa, how do we get them to be players in this, that we can access their funding? Or is it just a requirement of theirs that they need to kick in X amount of money for this plant?
Right. Okay.
I can kind of respond to that. When we were looking at studies earlier, the tribe stepped up and lined up grant funding that they would acquire and then roll it over into, at that time, the district for the new plant. And it was based on their proportion of the plant's needs. So I believe if they're of the, and I also believe, and I probably premature, but as the district, we might be able to require the tribe to come up with their proportionate share of a new plant. But those are discussions that can move forward. However, I'm confident that the tribe will provide their proportionate share. Again, without Peter Bernasconi, it's tough to make those kind of statements.
Right.
Had another thought about some things with regard to, the tribe. Keep in mind that the tribe is not within the district boundaries.
Okay.
We do their wastewater treatment on a contract basis. And that goes all the way back to when the county actually had it before the district was formed. The county established that agreement with the tribe. And then when the district was formed, the district took on that agreement with the tribe. So when it comes to the disadvantaged community, we cannot include them in any of the calculations because they are not within the district. And they therefore would not be within BAWA's boundaries. So that's something, just a nuance of how it works with the tribe.
I see. But regardless, we would have to get a sense of how much this whole project's going to cost, et cetera, before we can even approach them. And actually, we can see what the city can contribute with regards to funding to building a plant and so on and so forth. Okay, but I think it makes sense to do. Destin, you've been taking notes, right? You know what to go on.
Yes, I do, for sure. And I was just kind of thinking this discussion is going, it's been a great discussion, but I feel sorry for Michelle trying to take minutes on this one.
Just another comment going back to the statement I made about that legislation regarding economic hardship being created by a project. If it can be demonstrated that it gets to that point, it's not necessarily a showstopper for the project, but what it could be is an incentive or an advantage to acquire grant funding. In other words, if the need for the project is there and the Lahontan Water Board says this has to move forward because of, and their reasons, and then the BAWA says, well, it can't move forward because of the hardship, then you go to all of the people that might be doling out the funding and you say, look, here we are, we have to do this, there's a hardship, where do we get the funding? So it could actually enhance the ability to acquire funding. And maybe that's what happened in those Tahoe areas that Jonathan Lesbrance was referring to, Karen. I'm not sure, but it might be likely. In the area you referenced, Destin, I don't know if it was Los Osos or not, but they had, years ago, they had saltwater intrusion there, which was an issue. And also they were on septic systems through the whole community. So they had to do something. And Los Osos did deal with it that way. But you're right, tremendous increase in rates. Because the plant they built years ago was undersized from day one. So here we are today.
Yeah, exactly. They combined all those communities of Morro Bay, Los Osos. Morro Bay's wastewater treatment plant was literally a road separating it from the ocean.
Yep.
And it was bad, but thank God we're not there. But getting back to like Karen said, that Tahoe region, they definitely have a lot of different I don't even, regulations up there due to that basin, the Tahoe Basin, and their pristine water. But there's very much Lahontan would like to continue that down here through our valley as well, as we've seen with the bacteria in the Bishop Creek. And so, and I guess what I'm really going to say is, Mike Plasiak has always said, if you guys want help, we can write you violations for exceeding limits and doing things like that. I've always cringed at that fact because I feel like that's me saying I'm not doing my job because we're in violation every month. But potentially that might be something that we have to, not warding off those violations so much and let Mike, the friendly violations he called them, because he's trying to help us with grant eligibility. And maybe you just have to swallow my pride a little bit and be able to take those.
There might be a couple steps before we get there, Dustin. Mike could talk to some people at the state level before we get to the violations, and I'm with you. I don't want to get to the violation stage if there's other steps we can take first.
Absolutely, but I just reminded me of that conversation with Mike when he said that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the bottom line that I think Destin's trying to make, and I'll confirm it, is that Mike Plasiak is very interested in what we're doing, how we're doing it, at what speed we're moving. And he supports the efforts here in the Bishop area. I think he's very pleased with what's gone on in the last few years. And to have a regulator at his level in that position is to our advantage. And if we could continue to keep him in the loop and do the right thing, is to our advantage. Before I go any further, we've had this great discussion, but I want to see if Ron Stone is available. He technologically hasn't been. Ron, are you able to hear us, and can you contribute with comments?
Yes, Walt, I'm here. It was my error in the beginning. I got on the desktop computer instead of my normal laptop. And once I got out of there, I've been here present, believe it or not. And I've heard a lot of different good reporting on the status and the fact that we're on a pause button, so to speak, with regard to plant in the future and pursuing irrigation. I concur with all I've heard. Where are we? I like the idea of pursuing the feasibility study. I think the fact that we need a plant is obvious. And I say full speed ahead. One step at a time, but I'm back.
Okay, Ron. Thank you, Ron, for summarizing your thoughts. Keep in mind too, Jonathan Lesperance estimated a time frame from getting the green light to proceed with feasibility to actually starting a new plant could be about 5 years. So the discussion we're having today won't be manifested in a new plant, even if we made that decision, wouldn't be manifested in a new plant for 5 years. And in 5 years, the Lahontan board, there might be changes in leadership. Just a lot of things could happen, the availability of some funding, but funding would have to be in place prior to plant startup for sure. But there's a substantial lead time for a project of this magnitude.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So do we want to give Destin direction to contact Jonathan and request a proposal to summarize work that's been done, that's pertinent, and to proceed with additional work to advance the cost and feasibility study?
Yeah, I think so. I'm okay with that.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I would support it.
Well, Destin, in your free time, Destin, can you manage to put that together?
Absolutely. And then would this be a contract through the district And we would be paying our share to you guys. I mean, how would we, so that otherwise we need to, I need to be able to take this to council and it'll take a little while to get there. If the district would like to continue doing it the way we have in the past, then I think we're all right.
I believe it would be acceptable to the district. Jen, would there be any showstoppers to us advancing in that direction?
We would need to bring it before the board to get permission to do that.
Okay. Would we need the proposal in hand from Loomis? Yes. So Destin, you could proceed with requesting the proposal. It could be directed to the district. And then by our next board meeting, the second Wednesday of February, we could take that up at the meeting, and I see no reason why it wouldn't be approved. Ron, how do you feel about that, Ron?
I think that's the expedient way to do things, and I don't see a problem with our board. I bet it concurs.
Okay. Well,
I can make that happen.
Thank you, Destin. Now that addresses that aspect. Did we summarize our thoughts about the pasture irrigation in stating that we need to at least continue getting more information together? How do we want to proceed with that is my question.
I mean, at this point, what would be the next steps on that avenue, right? I mean, we're still looking at, we still don't have any sort of a quote from DWP as to how much the land would cost. We have a bunch of nebulous, we don't have anything clear from Lahontan on what we would have to change with regards to it, right? So I guess in that regard, it would still be getting information on those two steps, but I guess nobody's willing to actually commit to, Lahontan's not willing to commit to what's actually required.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard.
They're very good at not, they don't want to be any part of telling you what you have to do. You tell us what you want to do and we'll tell you if it's all right. But we do have a good, in some respects, we do have some direction from them when we went through our feasibility about what would be acceptable. So we got that at least kind of done. And then like the LADWP part with Todd there, but those time frame right now is they are, I guess they could be in doing the appraisal right now. I'm not sure. And then, but they expect the land to close escrow and be completely done by May of 23. So it's still a year off, but we still got to wait and see that number per acre number and all that before we get very far with that one. And I don't know if Todd wants to add anything or not to that, just if I missed any of that.
Looks like you're muted, Todd.
There we go. Do you hear me now? This is Todd.
Yes.
I apologize. Just going through the prompts here with the phone, but yeah, Destin is correct. Actually, as we're talking right now, I've received emails regarding the appraisal. Initially, we were talking about Bala contracting with an appraiser, to determine the value, but actually we're doing that in-house with DWP and are working on that now with our contract for the appraisal to be accomplished. So they're actually in the process, looking at the details, the value to be determined, et cetera, and we're ironing out the details. We did complete a preliminary map for the survey, and the survey crew is in the process of then determining the monuments to verify the acreage and whatnot. But we do have that all in place and going forward. So looking good. We just have to kind of wait and see what transpires with what you're discussing right now.
Todd, a question for you. As you move forward with the appraisal, will representatives from BAWA be involved in like a kickoff meeting to meet with the appraisers, or, you know, for them to understand use of the land and the different phases and so forth?
I don't think to the degree that you're explaining there that will happen. Basically, that's kind of being ironed out right now with us and the appraiser as far as the existing use and the proposed uses. I think we have pretty much what we need, but if that is necessary, we can do that. Basically, we presented a proposal and a request rather for the appraisal, and they will be then providing us with any questions that they needed clarification and to, you know, determine the value and whatnot. So it's pretty much at this point in-house. You know, it's DWP land that they're appraising. So if there's any questions, then we'll direct that to BAWA. But I don't see right now, like you said, a kind of a kickoff meeting where things will be established. They already have all that information that was presented previously, you know, for the project, and you know, the use of the land, the different acreages and things like that. And then we also have egress and ingress via, you know, road easement and things like that they're considering all the different parameters of.
Okay. Todd, what would be your best guess, and we're not going to hold you to this, but what would be your best guess on when that appraisal process would, at least the first stage, would be completed so that we could discuss numbers?
That is a very good question. This is the first time I've been involved with the appraisal done this way instead of doing it ourselves. So I would imagine a couple months, give or take. Potentially sooner, but they're, like I said, like we've been emailing back and forth and communicating the last week, so things are rolling and going forward. So I'm assuming, and again, don't hold that to me, Walt, as you've said, but I'm assuming probably around 60 days, give or take. But I'd have to verify that, and I can get back to Destin if you need a more concrete estimation of the time for completion on that.
Well, if you get it, that would be helpful to us to at least have some order of magnitude numbers initially. The sooner we can get this, the sooner we can work on our strategies that we've been kicking around in this meeting this morning. There's a lot of horses and carts and chickens and eggs running around. We don't want to get one before the other. And at the same time, we need to move forward. We would like to sequence our actions in a prudent manner. So having that number would be helpful, but
no problem.
We understand that it's a process that is going to take time. So we're with you on it, Todd.
Yeah, and I can find that out. Just simply talk with my supervisor, who's, you know, been around forever doing the appraisal in-house and how long it takes, basically, you know, when we do that. So I can get that to Destin pretty quickly.
Good. Good. All right. Further points. Destin, we asked you to take the lead on this morning, so coming back to you.
I got direction. I will get with Jonathan today and continue to move this forward. And as I said, Todd and I keep in conversation all the time, so I'll keep us all up to speed with that as well.
Okay. As an administrative matter, and I noticed that Steve Nixon wasn't on board this morning. Has he been copied into notices on the meetings? I didn't notice the copy list. Okay.
I texted him. He said he wasn't feeling well.
Okay. Thank you, Jen, for following up on that. I believe that Steve Nixon would be on board with everything we've discussed so far. Anything further, with regard to, let's call it the strategic discussion and the alternatives?
I think I
Okay.
have, okay, I know what I need to do. Thank you for the direction.
Okay. We appreciate you adding this to your to-do list, Destin. Ward, you've been able to dodge the bullet on a lot of the discussion, and we recognize your the value for you attending. Is there anything that you want to jump in on before we head to the next agenda item?
No, I find it fascinating and enjoy listening. Thank you for including me.
All right. Well, thank you for being there to keep us straight and on the correct path legally, anyhow. Agenda item number 7, staff and board reports. Staff, Michelle, do you have anything to report?
The only thing I want to say is that the 700 forms are gonna be due here soon. I think it opens up, I believe this is, I've only did it last year, I think maybe February 1st, so just keep that in mind. I'll send out email reminders, and if everyone can make sure their forms are done, that would be helpful. And maybe let me know that it's done. That way I can check you off the list.
Good enough. Thank you. Jen, do you have anything to report from your
don't.
end?
Thank you. I don't.
Okay, thank you. Those are staff. Do we have any board reports on any matters that we haven't covered?
Nothing for me.
I have nothing.
Okay.
Nothing here.
All right, so we have no board reports. Then at this time, we can move on to adjournment, and the next meeting will be April 19th, 2022, obviously, and the time will be 8 a.m. It would be nice if we could meet in the council chambers. We'll just see what the status of COVID is at that time. So we can adjourn at 9:05. Thank you all very much for your
Thank you, guys.
contribution this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Ron.